Colonel Richard Black is a combat veteran who has seen the face of war. He always talks about how he shed a bucket of blood for his country. He talks about seeing people killed next to him as a pilot. He's the former head of the U.S. Army's Criminal Law Division of the Pentagon, former Virginia State Senator. But most importantly, as Scott was just referencing, and I decided I should say something, he has seen the face of war, and he intends to stop it. Colonel Black.
Thank you much for the kind introduction. I'm Senator Dick Black, and the purpose of our press conference today is to alert the world to the great risk of nuclear accident occurring. We're growing very close to that. It's important to understand the nature of American military doctrine regarding nuclear weapons. Our nuclear doctrine grants the President of the United States plenary authority, unfettered authority, to launch a nuclear strike for any reason or for no reason at all. It is an offensive doctrine. It is not a defensive doctrine. It is a doctrine that allows the President to wake up and decide that he is going to carry out a nuclear Pearl Harbor against an enemy of his choice. Now, obviously, there are political considerations, but if you're talking about a nuclear war, you're talking about a situation where there is going to be such vast destruction that political considerations are going to dim into the background. There was a comment made just this last Friday by a fellow, Pranay Vadi, who is with the National Security Council. He's the senior arms control official, and he was commenting on why more nuclear weapons might be required. Now, both the United States and Russia have over 5,000 nuclear weapons currently. China has 600. Now, here's something that Mr. Vadi said as a representative from the White House. The National Security Council is in the White House. He said, quote, "We need to be fully prepared to execute if the President makes that decision." What does he mean by execute? He means we need to be prepared to launch a nuclear strike if the President decides we're going to do so. This is a great deal different from Russian or Chinese doctrine. The Russian doctrine is based on the defensive use of nuclear weapons. They can use them if they are imminently about to be attacked, if they are attacked, or if the cohesion of Russia as a nation is about to be destroyed by the attack of an enemy. So it should greatly distress us and concern us that we have a White House official saying we need to be prepared to execute if the President makes that decision. We should not, in a responsible government, we should never be talking about the President ordering a nuclear strike. Now, to go back with the war in Ukraine, which has gotten us to this point, Ukraine was never a vital United States interest. The war has been fought principally over the idea of whether Ukraine would be integrated into NATO, which would then allow nuclear missiles to be stationed right up to the Russian border. In other words, Russia would be in a posture where they could be attacked suddenly, unexpectedly, and have absolutely no time to respond. That really is the essence of what you get to with this enormous, deadly war in Ukraine. Now, the war is being fought at the doorstep of a giant nuclear superpower. You go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I lived through that. I lived in Miami, and I was in Havana, Cuba before the revolution. I was there after the revolution. I watched the whole thing unfold, and I literally discovered a vast military convoy that was moved secretly through the city of Miami at night in preparation to invade Cuba. Now, they never did, but it sure made my eyes bulge out while I was driving up Route 27 and this endless convoy came the other way. But at that time, there was such a dramatic difference because Russia was a weak nuclear power. It was not as a nuclear force, it was not a very big nuclear force. Today, it actually has more nuclear weapons than the United States. Both have roughly 5,000. They have a little more. But in any event, where we have gotten to, this war, this terrible war, the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War, is being fought on the doorstep of Russia. And the Russians entered the war in February of 22. 4 days after they crossed the border, negotiations with Ukraine began, peace negotiations. After 4 days. After 2 months, a peace agreement had been pretty well hammered out to the point where the first deputy foreign minister of Ukraine announced that they were virtually on the edge of an agreement, and it was at that point that the Prime Minister of Ukraine, or the Boris Johnson, was sent to basically tell them, knock off these peace talks, get back to the important work of fighting. When the peace agreement was about to be finalized, there were very few casualties, relatively. There was very little property destruction, and the parties both were fairly pleased with the peace agreement. It was something they both could live with. So all of this vast sea of bloodshed that has followed has been largely unnecessary. Now, what's happened is that Ukraine is running out of manpower. They're much smaller in population than Russia, and the casualties have worn them down. And as they have become weaker and weaker in terms of manpower, you have the United States and NATO becoming increasingly restless and anxious to sort of pull this thing off, to bring them to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. We've seen them with the United States and working together with Ukraine and NATO. They sank the flagship of the Russian fleet, the cruiser Moskva. In a very, very dramatic action, the United States orchestrated the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, which has permanently damaged the European economy, and particularly the economy of Germany, which was thrown into a recession because of the destruction of Nord Stream. More recently, we've had Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and he has been the lead man in a trial balloon to see whether Western countries could be incentivized to go ahead and send their own troops as trainers, just like in Vietnam, trainers, into Ukraine, which inevitably would lead to their engagement in battle. Everybody understands that. All of this has built up to the point where we just had the European Union elections, and the elections were a devastating loss for the powers that be in NATO. Tremendous conservative victory, and I think among other things it has reflected the fact that Europeans are sick and tired of war. They never wanted this war. It was imposed on them, and they would like to be away from it. But nonetheless, we continue, as has been mentioned, with the attacks to blind the radars that defend Moscow from an unprovoked attack by missiles coming in. We have helped Ukraine to launch the attacks on the Engels Air Base, where they have their nuclear bombers stationed, and it goes on and on. Most recently, we're now talking about making our nuclear doctrine even more aggressive. Now, I don't honestly know. If I had the assignment, how do you make the nuclear doctrine of the United States more aggressive than giving the president carte blanche authority to attack anybody at any time? I would have to ask a lot of questions if someone assigned me that task. But in any event, as we get closer to the election, as things become more desperate on the Ukrainian front lines, we have an anxious White House that is willing to attempt more and more reckless actions, and there's a very high risk that this nuclear gambit that's underway right now may not succeed, and that an accident could occur, and we won't be holding another press conference to announce the results of it when that's finished. So in any event, we'll continue, but thank you, and thank you, Scott, for your comments.